Hello and welcome to How Did This Not Get Made?
This is the podcast all about the movies you never saw, the scripts that were never filmed, and the ideas that never even made it to the page. My name is David Spencer.
And my name is Daniel Kaka.
Normally, I would ask, Dan, what are we talking about?
Mm-hmm.
But today, I have something to tell you all about.
Ooh, okay. Is it about how The Mandalorian was actually supposed to start in the 90s and we were supposed to get Baby Yoda then?
Oh, don't even get me started. Well, it is going to be about Star Wars television, which has quite a few stories behind it. You know, I am a massive, massive Star Wars fan, and I have been deep invested in Star Wars fandom for years. And so this is a story that I remember learning about the details as it was happening. How much do you know about Star Wars Detours?
So from what I know is what you have taught us while we were recording the Weird Alphabet.
Okay.
Because we were talking about kaiju.
Mm-hmm.
With kaiju, we were talking about Robot Chicken and how that got started. And during that conversation, that's when you brought up Star Wars Detours because the guys behind Robot Chicken were behind Star Wars Detours.
Mm-hmm.
And then I know Michael piped in for a bit and said that, oh, did you know that Weird Al was going to be in Star Wars Detours as well?
Yeah.
And I think for you, you didn't know that at the time.
Yeah, I was not aware of that at the time. Have you seen any imagery from this? Have you seen any clips from the show?
Yes, I have. So
Okay.
It's all CGI animation.
Yep.
It's very fluid, almost like whenever you watch any Lego movies, not the Lego movie or like the Lego movie 2, but any of the like straight to DVD streaming animations, those Lego animations where it's like very fluid and it doesn't feel like they're made of plastic at all. It kind of feels like that type of animation.
Yeah.
Almost, but they're not Legos. I want to briefly just go into just your fandom of Star Wars and just how that started for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've always been a massive Star Wars fan. I've always loved the movies and saw them all in the theaters and stuff. And in 2007, I got my first iPod for my, what would that be, 15th birthday? Something like that. And I immediately started trying to get into podcasts because I've always liked the idea of talking and radio stuff. So I immediately started searching for podcasts, found a Star Wars podcast, and that was like my thing. Every week listening to this 2-hour Star Wars podcast talking about news and speculation and fan events. And right at the time, that was when basically the same weekend that I started listening to them, they were covering Star Wars Celebration 4. So they have these big fan conventions every couple of years, Star Wars Celebration, which is going to come up in this story a couple of times because a lot of the biggest announcements happen around Celebration. And so the first Star Wars Celebration was in 1999 before the release of Phantom Menace, and then again before the release of Attack of the Clones, and then again before Revenge of the Sith. And then between the release of the Revenge of the Sith and the Disney buyout, they happened every 2 or 3 years, and they were kind of focused on some of the TV projects like Clone Wars or video games that were coming out. But anyway, so I got super, super invested in Star Wars fandom and really like learning about behind the scenes stuff as Clone Wars was coming out. Like I was listening to interviews with all of the cast and with Dave Filoni and following like the smallest bits of speculation that would come out. You know, this is a time where we may not have had any new movies on the horizon, but things were certainly happening with Lucasfilm and with Star Wars.
Yeah.
And any tiny little detail anybody can get their hands on was, you know, talked about and speculated about, which was really interesting researching this because I want to try to find as many primary sources as I can. And so I had so many little details of I think I remember this being a thing, and I think I remember them talking about that, but not being sure, and then trying to go online and find that information to confirm my memory, because, a lot of the story is 10 years old by now.
Yeah.
And that was proved to be a real challenge, to be able to try to find again a thing that I heard 10 years ago. This podcast that I listened to, their archives only went back to 2012. So yeah, I had a bit of a tough time, but so it goes.
Okay.
I have a Mandalorian hat, and I got my own Coven mask. I got one off Etsy that was modeled off of Luke's X-Wing helmet, which is super cool. I love getting compliments on my mask. Yeah, anyways, I'm all about the Star Wars.
Yeah. I mean, through Weird Alphabet, we fulfilled one of your greatest wishes, which is doing a podcast live in front of an audience. But we got to talk about Star Wars and The Phantom Menace.
Absolutely. And I can talk about The Phantom Menace all day long. Prequels are good. So as we get into this story, I kind of want to start with some background into the different parts of this story to kind of give some context to where this is going. And the first thing I want to talk about is something that you probably know a lot about as well, which is the way that television shows generally are made. TV shows usually have a fairly predictable timeline from production to release. What normally happens is a pilot would be written and then financed by a production company to be filmed. Then it doesn't have a network at this point, but then is shopped around to different networks, who then one will pay to put it on for a half season or a season. If it's successful, produce more seasons, etc., etc. I feel like not a lot of people know about is that generally, when a pilot is produced, the creators don't know which network is going to be airing it. They're producing the pilot to see if they can get interest, and then the network will pick it up and then pay for the rest of the show. And oftentimes, pilots are made a year before the rest of the series is made. Although that's changing more and more, because we have studios like Netflix who are producing entire series of a show based off of an IP or based off of an established writer, paying for multiple seasons right off the bat before even producing a pilot.
They have like a very hands-off approach when it comes to their television shows. And it seems like with their TV shows, there's always like the 2-season run that like most that they find out. But it seems like if someone has a really good idea, they'll let them do a full season, and if people really like it, then they'll say, all right, you get a second season, and then that's where most die off.
But we even have, like, when Netflix started producing TV shows, one of their earliest shows was House of Cards, which wasn't created based off of, here's this really interesting pilot we saw. It was, hey, people like David Fincher movies and people enjoy this kind of political intrigue thing. Let's put together a project that combines all of these things. Oh, there's this House of Cards British series that's done well on the website. And they developed it to be one of their first shows, but without the whole pilot process. And now you have things like, nobody's going to sell their pilot to Disney Plus. Disney Plus is going to in-house produce their own shows based off of their IPs, shows based off of Star Wars and based off of Marvel. And I guess it's not entirely true that they're not buying pilots on spec, but it does seem to be that's a sort of thing that is kind of going away. The reason that I want to bring all of this up is because when it comes to Star Wars, pre-Disney, pre-Mandalorian, Star Wars produced their TV shows very, very, very differently. So to back up a little bit more, Star Wars, possibly one of the biggest movie franchises of all time. Until 2013, though, it's one of the only franchises not owned by a major studio. Fox owned the distribution rights to the 6 films, but Lucasfilm owned everything else, and they could do whatever they wanted with the IP. Lucasfilm could create something and then sell it to anybody. It's not a done deal that Fox is going to be the one to air whatever Lucasfilm creates. And so, as such, Lucas is not creatively beholden to anybody, which is absolutely the way he liked it. And so, to talk about Detours, I kind of want to talk a little bit about a different Lucasfilm project, which is the Clone Wars. Dan, have you ever seen the Clone Wars?
I have not watched the Clone Wars. I followed Samurai Jack, and I remember watching Samurai Jack, and at the end of Samurai Jack, aside from the reboot that happened a few years ago, but I remember watching Samurai Jack, and they never finished it. I finished the series, and I was like, there's got to be more, because it's bad guy's still alive, Jack's still around. Like, what happened? Did he actually do it? To find out, and I watched a behind-the-scenes video to find out that the creator, Genndy Tartakovsky, he was asked by George Lucas to do Star Wars Clone Wars. If you don't know, he also did Powerpuff Girls and Dexter's Lab.
Yeah. He's done a lot of great stuff.
So he said that his reasoning for leaving Samurai Jack to do Clone Wars is like, if George Lucas calls you up to do Star Wars, you do Star Wars.
Yeah.
And it kind of left Jack behind. I mean, eventually he got to finish the story, but I think like one of the actors, he passed away.
Mako.
Yeah. So that's my knowledge of Star Wars Clone Wars. And I kind of looked at Clone Wars as like, you're the reason why Samurai Jack did not get an ending.
Well, you're talking about Clone Wars, but I am talking about the Clone Wars.
Oh.
In 2008, we had The Clone Wars, which is the CG show that went on for 6 seasons and then was revived for a 7th season last year by Disney+. We did have Genndy Tartakovsky's 2003 project of the same name. One of the interesting things is that, as you said, Lucas had tasked somebody else with making this. And Genndy Tartakovsky's Clone Wars series wasn't even the first animated show based off of Star Wars. In the 80s, we had Droids and Ewoks.
We are the the spirits from the forest go. I wouldn't care, but it's a dangerous affair. I'm in trouble again.
But those were also lent out by Lucasfilm, basically letting somebody else borrow the characters to make the show. And George Lucas himself took a very hands-off approach to that. Now, after Revenge of the Sith came out, George Lucas started talking about getting involved with animation and television himself. Now that he was done with his 6 saga movies, he wanted to keep telling Star Wars stories, but in a different medium, and wanted to do that with television. At Star Wars Celebration 3 in 2005, which was a month before Revenge of the Sith came out, Lucas said, we are working on a 3D continuation of the pilot series that was on the Cartoon Network. We probably won't start that project for another year. That was a really great starting point, and people really enjoyed this show, and we want to take some of the ideas that Genndy Tartakovsky had and provided the series with, and we want to do our own thing with it and make a 3D, a CG animated Clone Wars series.
Was there a decision as to why they wanted to do 3D over 2D animation?
I didn't find anything specifically about that, but if I was to guess, I would say it's that George Lucas really likes computers and really likes pushing the boundaries with what you can do with computer effects. Because even at the time, there's not a lot of CG animated shows, and the few that there were looked pretty terrible.
Yeah.
Going back to 2005, Steve Sansweet, who was the director of fan relations at Lucasfilm, he talked more details that summer at San Diego Comic-Con. He announced that Lucasfilm had started its own animation division and would be developing Clone Wars completely in-house. They had already hired an impressive team, including Dave Filoni, which is a name that's now pretty synonymous with Star Wars television. Are you familiar with Dave Filoni at all?
I'm sure I am because... Oh, yeah. Okay.
He was the supervising director of Clone Wars. He was the creator and showrunner of Rebels and is now second in command behind Jon Favreau on The Mandalorian, having written and directed 2 episodes of the show. He is one of the guys people associate with Star Wars now, especially because he kind of learned under the tutelage of George Lucas, learned at the feet of the master, so to speak, in his years of working on Clone Wars. But before Clone Wars, he actually worked on a couple of other animation projects, including directing a couple episodes of Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Awesome. Do you have a list of which specific episodes he did?
I remember for sure he did the Northern Air Temple, which was the one with the people in gliders.
Okay, I found the episodes.
Sure.
Right here. Actually, these are monumental ones. So he actually did the pilot episode, the Avatar Returns and the Boy in the Iceberg.
He did?
He did.
Oh, I missed that.
He did Imprisoned Jet. Oh, one of the best episodes, The Blue Spirit.
Yes.
There was a fortune teller. You mentioned the Northern Air Temple, and it looked like he was done after the first series because he directed both the part 1 and part 2 of The Siege of the North.
And that's about the time that he got the call from Lucasfilm to say, hey, are you interested in doing this project? He talks a lot about that as well. If you check out on Disney Plus, they have a great behind the scenes documentary about The Mandalorian, and in that Dave Filoni talks a lot about when he was first hired for Clone Wars.
Yeah, and if George Lucas calls you up to make a Star Wars, you stop everything to make a Star Wars.
Well, and Dave Filoni himself is a massive fan. Like, he talked about how he had a cardboard standee of Jedi Plo Koon in his office before he even started working on Star Wars. So yeah, he is a true fan. He doesn't come into this story at all for the rest of this, but he's somebody that's good to mention when it comes to Star Wars, and especially Star Wars TV. Jump forward to 2007, 2 years into production. That's when Lucasfilm really started to push Clone Wars. In May, Lucasfilm released the first trailer, which featured completely finished animation. George Lucas, Steve Sansweet, and others talked a lot about the show in interviews and conventions. In a TV Guide interview in September, George said, quote, "We're going to do 100 episodes. I think we're on number 40 right now. We'll probably end up with 50 to 60 episodes before we start to put it on the air. We'd like to put it on next fall in about a year from now, but we'll see what happens." So Clone Wars has 40 completed episodes and 50 to 60 more written and being worked on. 100 episodes, but it was missing one key thing, which is the network where it's going to air on. See, George Lucas takes the pilot approach to an extreme. Because Lucasfilm is just made of money and they could just make whatever they want, he could just produce, get literally two seasons worth of episodes finished, and then figure out how in the world people are actually going to see this. It's an extremely risky way to make television, but also it's Star Wars, so you can feel pretty safe that somebody is going to pay for this. Here's a longer excerpt from that same TV Guide interview. Lucas says, "Well, we're doing these before we get a commitment, so we're just doing them on the faith that we're going to sell them. I mean, we're doing them ourselves so we can finance them. We don't need to have a commitment of any kind. We're simply going to sell them." TV Guide asks, "Will you be looking for a network like HBO to say, we'll take all 100? Lucas, "Yeah, but they probably wouldn't do that. Somebody might, but usually what they'll do is they'll take 13 or 26 and then see what happens, and they'll take the next group. If that group doesn't work, then we'll move it to another place." Lucasfilm is basically acting as a production company. So, side note, George Lucas is saying the network will only want to make a 1-season contract. We'll do 1 season, and then if they don't like it, we'll just take the show somewhere else.
And yeah, that's not unusual for TV shows to jump from network to network. Like Futurama made the jump from Fox to Comedy Central, and us being Community fans, we definitely felt it when it was being jumped around from different networks.
Yeah, but one of the other things with that is that usually it gets canceled and then saved by somebody else, and then they keep on producing a new season of television. Usually doesn't happen where they have an entire season or two still on the table that they could just sell to somebody else. It's usually on the faith of continuing to make episodes. Back to this TV Guide interview. TV Guide, "Yeah, but usually a network will commission a single pilot off a script or pick ... Well, you know the process." Lucas, "Right, but I have enough confidence that this is good, and I'll make it really good, so I'm not worried about that part of it. And if worse comes to worse, we'll end up with a lot of library product." So clearly, George Lucas approaches television in a very, very different way, but of course he could afford to. And I love the idea that he's just like, if it doesn't work out, it'll just sit on the library, and we'll figure out some other way to distribute it.
He's literally in a position where he can do whatever he wants to do. And if it's a loss, like, it doesn't matter, but it seems like he's been sitting on this property that's so profitable that it really doesn't matter. He's just
Yeah.
doing whatever the hell he wants. And then he's like, all right, guys, figure it out.
This would be like 5 years before streaming TV was really starting to take off. So the idea was it would either be on air, in a time slot, or we'll just release and sell the DVDs of it, and people will buy DVDs of our full completed television show.
Oh, yeah.
But anyways, Clone Wars was picked up in 2008 by Warner Brothers to be aired on Cartoon Network. It got a theatrical release of the first 3 seasons that summer. It ended up running for 6 seasons before it was canceled by Disney, but then revived in 2019 for a final season on Disney+. This whole way of making television would have been a massive risk for anyone other than George Lucas and Star Wars. Of course, this was not the only television show that they decided to produce this way. And Lucasfilm was working on other projects that had the same sort of production timeline. By the way, just as a side note, Clone Wars is a very interesting show that I think is worth watching. A lot of people think that it's the Dave Filoni show, but really George Lucas was the main decision maker, and it was kind of up to Dave Filoni to figure out how to make it happen. And most of the time it was George Lucas saying like, let's do an episode arc about this. And then that was about as much as George would contribute. And then Dave Filoni and the team would figure out, actually tell the story.
Is there any input that Dave Filoni has put in outside of the influence of George Lucas?
Like into Clone Wars?
I guess into Clone Wars, or kind of into more Star Wars lore.
Oh, well, definitely into Star Wars. So in Clone Wars itself, it's like any creative thing. It's really tough to be able to say, this is definitely this person, that's definitely that person. I do think Dave Filoni is mostly responsible for the visual style of it, and he had a lot of visual touches that I think brought that series to life. After Clone Wars ended, he went on to be the creator of Star Wars Rebels, which was produced under Disney, of which Dave Filoni was the main guy and the showrunner in the way that we typically think of a showrunner. I personally am not as into Rebels, but I know a lot of people really love it. On Mandalorian, Jon Favreau is the showrunner, but Dave Filoni is extremely involved in the creative process as well, especially as it relates to characters and ideas from Clone Wars and Rebels who have showed up in The Mandalorian. Especially like a lot of that Mandalorian lore, Dave Filoni is very attached to. He is very close to a lot of that as it was created in Clone Wars and in Rebels.
And I think Disney is doing something really smart with The Mandalorian. Mandalorian is drawing in so many Star Wars fans who are just simply the movie fans. And it's marrying this other narrative of Rebels and Clone Wars and taking those characters and then starting to like slowly feed it in. And I know by the time this comes out, all of season 2 of The Mandalorian is out, and hopefully all of our listeners have watched it. But yeah, we have quite a few characters from Clone Wars.
Oh yeah,
in The Mandalorian. Now I know that you've been watching, I think we have 2 episodes left by the time we're recording this now. Yeah. But what characters have we seen from Clone Wars in The Mandalorian?
Ahsoka is a big one. She was the biggest character in Clone Wars that didn't come from a movie. She was a brand new character, and Ahsoka's actually had a very interesting journey because when she was first introduced, fans hated her, but then over the course of Clone Wars, the character grew up, the fans became more attached to her, and now she's basically is for Star Wars what Harley Quinn is for Batman. This character that was created in an animated series and has just gotten more and more fan love and fan attachment, and now we just got a live action version of. Appeared again in Rebels, and then now appeared again in Mandalorian. And Ahsoka especially is a character that is like, there's always been so much kind of wonder around because they introduce this character as Anakin's apprentice in the Clone Wars movie, and immediately everybody knows, well, Anakin doesn't have an apprentice in Revenge of the Sith, so something terrible has to happen to her. And so that's always been a really interesting journey. She was implied to be killed off in Rebels, and then Dave Filoni, after the episodes where she appeared in Rebels, and then, there's an episode that basically ends with her fighting Darth Vader and a door closing as she is, getting attacked by Vader, with the implication being, oh snap, Ahsoka might be dead, but, they cut away, and so you don't actually see what happens. there was a, at Celebration or something, for a Rebels panel, Dave Filoni was wearing a t-shirt that says Ahsoka lives with a question mark and didn't address the Ahsoka stuff at all, but just was wearing this shirt. At the end of the panel, they do a trailer for the next season. Everybody comes off and then comes back on for final thank yous and goodbyes. And it was very easy to miss, but keen eye fans noticed that when Dave Filoni came back, his shirt now said Ahsoka lives with an exclamation mark. He went and changed his shirt to look almost exactly the same, but with an exclamation mark, only for like the 2 minutes that he would be on stage at the end. I know there's a lot of shows that spurn lots of fan theories of like, oh, the creators are really telling us this and trying to hit at that. And 9 times out of 10, those TV conspiracy theories never turn out, and the creators weren't actually dropping hints. People were just assuming connections. Dave Filoni was one of those guys who was actually dropping hints like that. One more thing with Clone Wars. That show is pure George Lucas in that when it is good, it is fantastic. But when it is bad, you are like, dear God, why would anybody put this on television? This is horrendous.
My grandpa always told me, don't watch your credits, watch your health. So while I was watching my health, someone stole my credits.
Most of the first season and like half of the second season is like that. If you do decide to watch it, this is one of those shows where you can just look up what the best episode arcs were and just watch the best episodes. You don't need to watch the whole thing.
Is there an arc that you particularly favor or suggest to anyone who's going into Clone Wars?
Probably my favorite arc is what's known as the Umbara arc. Usually the way they told stories is they did like 3 or 4 episodes that were tied together in one arc. And this was about a Jedi general who basically was obsessed with winning the war and then like started basically committing war crimes and doing awful, heinous things with the idea of winning the war. And it was really interesting for this kid's cartoon that's set in space about magic space wizards to be dealing with war crimes and that idea. And like it had a bunch of clones trying to, kind of rein him in and stop him.
That's the thing about Star Wars is that on the surface feels like a kind of like a samurai movie, this kung fu movie in space, and down below you learn like politics and foreign affairs by accident.
I will say with Clone Wars, basically any episodes that focus on the clones are the best episodes. Like if clones are the main characters of the arc, those episodes are generally really, really good. Which you wouldn't expect, but they do a really great job with the clone troopers there. Clone troopers who are all voiced by D. Bradley Baker and manages to use the same voice but with slight variations in personality for each one. Are you familiar with D. Bradley Baker?
I am not, but when you mentioned that, it reminded me of Scott Pilgrim versus the World. Chris Evans.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, he voiced all of his stunt doubles.
Hey, I'm gonna get a coffee. You homies want anything? No, I just mix it. No, dig it.
That's what it reminded me of, but go on about.
D. Bradley Baker, he's also somebody from Avatar. He voices 2 of the most important characters. 2 characters that appear in almost every episode. What do you think?
It's Momo and Appa.
Yep, he voices all of the animal sounds in Avatar just come from this one guy.
I'm D. Baker, and my characters are Appa and Momo. They just give me a drawing of the creature, and I look at it, and then I make sounds that I think that creature would make.
I'm getting way off subject. Before I get back to the actual story of Detours, there is one more fun connection, because you asked about characters who showed up in Mandalorian who were from Clone Wars or Rebels. There's the Darksaber that Gideon has that showed up in Clone Wars originally and was wielded by a Mandalorian who was in charge of this like terrorist group known as Death Watch, who was basically saying like, hey, we don't like that Mandalore is a peaceful planet right now. We used to be warriors and we need to go be warriors again. And that group known as Death Watch ended up becoming the cult of Mandalorians that the titular Mandalorian is a part of. That's called, they call him a child of the Watch. And one of those Mandalorians is voiced by Jon Favreau, giving himself his own cameo, because he actually voiced in Clone Wars this Mandalorian with the Darksaber years earlier.
Oh.
For generations, my ancestors fought proudly as warriors against the Jedi. Now, that woman tarnishes the very name Mandalorian.
He only voiced a character in Clone Wars because he happened to be doing sound on Iron Man 2 at Skywalker Ranch when they were like, hey, you want to come in and voice this Mandalorian terrorist with a black lightsaber? Yeah. Anyways, lots of fun connections in the world of Star Wars. Let's go back to 2007, back into our main story. I'm going to read one more quote from that TV Guide article, which that TV Guide interview just like unlocked so many things about the way Lucas makes TV. TV Guide asks, you've loosened the shackles on what you allow people to do with Star Wars material. The internet has given everybody a forum, but there was a time when you didn't want people to do that. And now, obviously, you've changed your mind. Lucas responds, quote, it's not a matter of changing your mind. It's a matter of before, basically, I had everything at stake with each one of these movies, and I didn't want to jeopardize that. And so, when these last 3 came out, we were much more lenient about that sort of thing, and now that they're finished, it's just a part of the culture now. You can't not let people do it. I especially like the comedy. There's a lot of people doing funny things and parodies of Star Wars online that are just hysterical. So that's going to lead us back into Star Wars Detours. I love that this interview has this wonderful quote from Lucas about how he feels about comedy and Star Wars. So now I want to talk to you a little bit about a show called Robot Chicken. Are you a fan of Robot Chicken?
I am. I've watched a Robot Chicken or two.
Now, I found some really interesting stuff about how Robot Chicken started. Do you know about its history?
If you go back to the Weird Alphabet, I remember going through the history of Robot Chicken.
Oh, okay.
I remember that it started off in a magazine where they were doing like comic strips in there with action figures.
That was Matt Senreich doing the comic strips with the action figures. And through that, Seth Green and Matt Senreich started to become friends. But their actual first stop motion short that they worked on together was in 1999, which was for a Conan O'Brien segment.
Oh.
Seth Green was going to make an appearance on Conan O'Brien. He didn't want to just have another whatever interview and thought it would be fun if he brought a short. So him and Matt Senreich made this thing with a custom Conan O'Brien figure that he could bring to Conan's show as something to do instead of answering the same BS questions and the same anecdotes.
Britney! It's me, Conan!
Oh my god, Conan O'Brien! I love your show! Do you want to make out with me?
Okay.
That'd be great! You can be my boyfriend and we can live together in Florida and you can take me to school and help me learn to drive and vote and stuff.
Okay.
The short then turned into a series of shorts produced for Sony's Screen Blast, which was an online video service that had about as much success as Yahoo TV.
Wait, what year did that come out?
You know, I don't have the exact year on that, but it would have been in like 2000.
Okay. Like YouTube, now we see YouTube as like, oh, if you're looking for any video, just go to YouTube immediately. Not many people realize how young YouTube was because it didn't really like...
YouTube wasn't started until 2005. And before that, there were a lot of other companies, and Sony being one of them, who tried to make some sort of online video site. But I think the thing that they were missing that YouTube did was let anybody upload to this and create its own media landscape as opposed to trying to move, the media that we already know about into the digital world.
Yeah.
The series failed, and the two were bouncing the project around for years until it was finally picked up in 2005 by Adult Swim, who, at the time, hadn't been creating any of its own original content. They were just kind of doing re-edits of Space Ghost Coast to Coast and stuff like that. So Robot Chicken started in 2005. It slowly gained a following. But what really caused a ton of success for the show was YouTube. Sketches were being uploaded to YouTube and went viral. And in those days, I remember seeing Robot Chicken sketches on YouTube, and I just thought it was a YouTube thing before I realized that these were coming from an actual TV show. I'm certain that I am not alone in thinking that at the time. And in those early days, by far the most popular sketch, and what probably is still the most well-known sketch, is the Emperor's phone call. You know this sketch?
I don't.
You don't know this? Oh, so it's Palpatine sitting in his office in Coruscant getting a phone call from Darth Vader after the Death Star is blown up. And he's basically...
Actually, I have it on right now.
Okay, you should watch this right now. I can't believe you've never seen this before. This is like the Robot Chicken sketch.
Vader, how's my favorite Sith? Whoa, 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 whoa. Just slow down. Huh? What do you mean they blew up the Death Star? Oh! Who's they? What the hell is an aluminum falcon?
I'm surprised you've never seen that before. This is classic. What I find so interesting is that this was a really smart sketch, but also felt like a big risk to them. And in fact, some people, I think it was Matt Senreich specifically, who was pretty wary of doing any sketches that poked fun at Star Wars and at George Lucas. At this point, Lucas was still pretty precious with his IP. You know, this is about a year before the quote I said earlier about how he loves the humor. The common understanding was that if you poked George too much, he would sue. Here's a quote from Matt Senreich, and this is coming from Inverse's Oral History of Robot Chicken, which I found a ton of great quotes from. Matt Senreich says, quote, "A couple of days after it aired, I got a call on my phone and it said Lucasfilm on the caller ID. I looked at Seth and he was like, oh my God. So I pick up the phone and say, hi, you've reached Matthew Senreich and Seth Green's office. How can I help you? Pretending to be an assistant. After some confusion on the other end, she was like, I love the sketch that you guys did. So George apparently loved the sketch and even showed it at a board meeting, saying that this was exactly the type of humor that wasn't cannibalizing the brand.
Okay.
See, I feel like at this point, you know, a lot of jokes about Star Wars were kind of poking fun at how silly the whole concept is, but also poking fun at George Lucas and the way that he makes things, of having lots of special effects and, oh, isn't Jar Jar such a terrible character? And man, he makes movies out of order. But this was a case of people who are doing something in universe that just adds a funny context to something we already know. This is a type of idea that comes from fandom. The conversations that you and your friends have about what happens just off screen.
Yeah.
And I think that might be the reason why George was like, this is the kind of thing that I really like and the kind of thing that I want to see with Star Wars.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. I know a lot of the humor that was around Star Wars was something from like Patton Oswalt, where he heavily criticized the Phantom Menace.
Yeah.
I can understand the difference between like having fun with the material, not having fun in the expense of the material.
Absolutely. Around this time, George Lucas started to become a lot more friendly with Star Wars parodies. At Celebration 4 in 2007, he actually presented the main prize for the Fan Film Awards, a whole collection of people doing fan films about Star Wars. And the grand prize was the George Lucas Picks Prize, basically what he decided was his favorite. And he presented that award to Matt Sloan and Aaron Yonda for Chad Vader.
May I speak with you a moment, my master?
It's just Randy, okay, Chad?
Yes, my master.
And don't kneel, it's weird.
Going back, though, to Robot Chicken. Whatever it was that George thought made for good Star Wars comedy, these guys had found it. They were invited out to Lucasfilm to tour the facilities, and somebody took the opportunity to pitch a full half-hour Star Wars special. And I think Matt Senreich said in that inverse thing that he remembers Seth stepping on his foot at saying that because, you know, they didn't, again, they do not want to poke the bear that is Lucasfilm.
Yeah.
Here's another quote from that oral history. George Lucas is the one we had to thank because he became a fan of Robot Chicken, and that sparked an interest in George, who's a very reclusive and private guy. But he stuck up a friendship with Matt and Seth, and so he was on board from the get-go. It was one of the easier deals we ever did because back then, when he owned the company, it was just, George wants to do it, so let's make it happen. After this meeting, they started to go into production of a full 30-minute Star Wars special using some of their old skits, but writing and producing a whole bunch more that were just focused on Star Wars. And that came out in 2007 and actually featured a sketch with George Lucas playing himself.
You're George Lucas!
I take it you're here for the Star Wars convention.
I sure am. Want to see my costume? See? I'm a Tauntaun. But I don't have to tell you. You invented Tauntauns.
Well, that's very interesting.
Listen to my Tauntaun call.
Honestly, I think is one of the best sketches in the whole special. That Robot Chicken Star Wars special is, I think, super great. And they ended up doing 2 more. They did a part 2 and part 3, which are also fantastic. But that first Star Wars special, I think, is my favorite Star Wars parody of anything. They really were super, super funny and just nailed it. There's a whole wealth of Star Wars parodies, but Robot Chicken Star Wars special is probably my favorite. So yeah, and after Robot Chicken did their special, shows like Family Guy did a Star Wars episode.
I love the fact that Family Guy had done this, but the fact that Seth Green is a part of both of those worlds, and they even poke fun at it.
And that's the final chapter in the Star Wars saga.
What about the prequels?
I think the Cleveland show is going to do those.
Dad, one question. What do you got against Seth Green?
I just think he's a douche. You got a problem with that?
Well, we're all entitled to our own opinion. For example, me, I think Seth MacFarlane's a douche.
You know, and of course, it actually cuts both ways because Seth MacFarlane is a voice in a lot of Robot Chicken, including voicing the Emperor in that sketch we watched.
That's great.
Star Wars was something you could poke fun at and play with. Everybody was jumping on board at the opportunity. And it wasn't long until Star Wars parody was going to be produced by Lucasfilm themselves.
Detours! You ready? Punch it!
Jump ahead 2 years. In 2009, it was announced that Lucasfilm was in production of a new animated series. This one would be a comedy. Clone Wars had hit its stride well into the 2nd season, and Lucasfilm Animation was looking for ways to expand. George Lucas always saw Star Wars as full of possibility with different genres, and he was willing to take the risk of making a comedy series set in the universe. And when it came to who would create this show, the answer was obvious.
Seth MacFarlane.
The creators of Robot Chicken. And by the creators of Robot Chicken, I don't just mean Seth Green and Matt Senreich. I mean basically the entire writing and directing staff was working on this new Star Wars series as well. They took in the entire crew to start writing and directing this.
I mean, that's kind of in line with what George Lucas does. He never just hires 1 or 2 people individually for what they can do. He's like, this production company is doing something great. I'm just going to swallow that whole production company whole and have them do my bidding.
Absolutely. Unlike Robot Chicken, this was a series that needed to be more family-friendly. There was no way Lucasfilm Animation was going to have Palpatine dropping F-bombs. Seth Green said about the project in 2010, quote, "The Star Wars universe is so dense and rich, it's crazy to think that there aren't normal, mundane, everyday problems in a world so well-defined. And it's even crazier to think of what those problems might be, since it's all set in a galaxy far, far away. What do these characters do when they're not overthrowing empires?"
This show reminds me a lot of the new Teen Titans show, Teen Titans Go, where the old Teen Titans, and I guess Titans Now, the live action show, is taking things a lot more seriously. There are actually like villains that they have to deal with. There's with Titans, there's this through-line story, whereas Teen Titans Go seems to be like, okay, well, what do these superheroes do now in the mundane? Like, I think there's a full episode where I think Beast Boy and Cyborg are trying to find the perfect burrito.
So why are we on the roof?
For the ultimate burger burrito smackdown, bro!
And that's a full episode.
So that's the kind of story that this was going to tell as well. Or, I haven't seen this show, but I've heard a lot of great things about Star Trek Lower Decks, which is, what are these people on the bottom end of the Enterprise, what are they doing, and what are the mundane problems that they're dealing with while on this spaceship that's crashing through the universe?
And that's done by Starburns Industries, yeah.
Yeah. We have a new Star Wars project in development. This is where it was tough to really find details about this part of the story. Everyone working on the project was extremely tight-lipped. The only details that would trickle out for the next 2 years came from interviews with Seth Green, and his answers were always some variation of, I can't say anything. In a 2010 TV Guide interview, Green said, on my own projects, I'm really candid because I think people appreciate hearing about the process and they become more connected and invested in the material. So I never exclude our fans and am always forthcoming, even in the early stages of a project, because they enjoy that. But Star Wars fans are different, and Lucasfilm knows that. They have to protect their projects until they are ready to be seen. I was able to find some online speculation on the project, but a lot of that online speculation was mixed at best. There was a ton of skepticism, just the idea that you could create an entire TV series that's just a comedy in Star Wars. And if that joke would get old.
On the surface, it kind of feels like an SNL sketch. And you're like, just like with Robot Chicken, like all of those are in a sense sketches and you can just kind of pick up and do whatever you want for that moment. And then you can just let that idea go.
By the third Star Wars special, there were definitely some jokes that were getting stale.
Yeah.
One article I found from Collider said, fans already do a good job of creating humor in Star Wars, so why does Lucasfilm feel the need to do it themselves? Because there's always more money the company could make.
Yes, they can make more money, but it feels like the motives behind this wasn't that he was trying to make more money. His motive behind it was like, okay, well, these guys are doing this on their own. Like, if they're going to deal with Star Wars, like, I might as well produce it anyways. Like, he's got the rights to all of this stuff, and no one has to ask him permission over and over again.
A lot of people have kind of credited George Lucas's decisions to what is going to make him the most money, but I really don't think that's the case in most times. Like, when he sold Lucasfilm to Disney for $4 billion, he donated all of that to education charities. He's somebody that is not as money hungry as I think his reputation shows. I think it's something where people are like, oh, he's only creating these to sell toys, when really I think it's that George Lucas is more interested in what is visually interesting, and that just happens to be the same thing that will make a lot of money with toys. There's other stories with George Lucas, like he was trying to build sound stages to film in at Lucasfilm Ranch, but the housing boards in the area kept blocking it. Like, he had all this land that wasn't being used and that he was going to try to turn into studios, but people in the area, didn't want there to be vehicles going in and out in this neighborhood with all these rich, fancy homes, and they blocked him being able to make this. So instead, George Lucas sold all the property to low-income housing for an extremely discounted rate. So now all these rich people would just be upset with poor people being their neighbors. Stuff like that makes me like George Lucas a lot. A lot of the speculation, though, wasn't really about Seth Green and Matt Senreich not being able to pull it off, but really the idea that nobody would be able to pull this off. But there was people who had hope that it would be not bad and maybe even good. Especially in, a lot of the hardcore Star Wars fans, especially those who are big fans of Clone Wars, saying they're doing a good job with animation here. What's to say that they won't be able to pull it off in this other area as well? Seth Green said in an interview, quote, people think they know what it's going to be like, but they're not even close. I think maybe the hardcore fans are afraid. They just love Star Wars so much that they don't want this thing to suck. They want that assurance. They don't want to be mad at us. And I can assure them right here and now that they won't be mad. In the absence of information, everyone is theorizing about it and then translating their theories into 6 different languages. And because Matt and I are on board, people are thinking in headlines like, quote, scandal rocks the Star Wars world.
With the Star Wars fan community, it's been inviting and toxic.
Yes.
At the same time. And it feels like there's a lot of online chat, the speculations, the theories that are out there, which are fun to do, but it soon turns into a lot of gatekeeping.
Yes.
When it gets that far.
Star Wars fandom is a very complicated place. And I would say at this time, 2010, 2011, we were now 5 or 6 ways away from the movies. A lot of the casual Star Wars fans, most people didn't like the prequels very much, and that turned off a lot of casual Star Wars fans to the whole galaxy. And it was really only those hardcore fans still around watching Clone Wars. But those hardcore fans tend to be split into two groups. Either everything George Lucas touches is gold and everything he does is great and Lucasfilm cannot do any wrong, or the hardcore fans that think that there has not been a single good Star Wars thing since the release of Empire Strikes Back in 1980. Both of these, I feel like, no matter how good or bad a thing is at the time, both of these would still be stuck in their ways. Pre-Disney Star Wars fandom was definitely different, and it's only gotten more complicated since then.
Yes.
But there was a ton of morbid curiosity around the project. It's such a weird and potentially terrible idea, kind of like the Lego movie, which is something that's terrible on paper, but could end up being brilliant. One odd thing I found while researching this, and this is one of those cases where I heard a detail and was trying to look it up and then found a tiny bit of information that was incorrect. There were some people who you'll hear talk about this show as being referred to as Star Wars Squishies as the production title it was being made under, with the idea that these are 3D characters that can squish and stretch. That was actually an entirely different show, because at the same time, Lucasfilm Animation was also developing a series for preschoolers based off of the Galactic Heroes toy line, which supposedly was called Squishies because George Lucas referred to those toys as Squishies. It is tough to be able to find information on this because there's so many conflicting reports, as fan blogs at the time were trying to grasp onto any scrap of detail they can, and often conflating stories and not being too detailed into seeing if something is 100% factual before reporting on it. In 2011, that was the first time that the series was referred to as Detours. It wasn't officially announced, but that name started to float in the public consciousness more. I couldn't find where or how this was discovered. The first reference I found to the name Detours was in a 2011 Forbes interview with Seth Green. The interviewer asked about Star Wars Detours by name, and Green said, quote, "That's not even information that should be in the form of a question, let alone something I can respond to."
The title Detours, do you know what that refers to or where they got that from?
You know, I didn't find anything specifically about why the title Detours. I would assume it's because the idea is these are the stories that are happening just off camera. These are the detours to the main plot line, you know, where instead of having the main thing going forward, let's go off to the side and see what's happening over at Dex's Diner right now.
And I feel like it's kind of a play off of the Disneyland ride, Star Tours.
Absolutely. Seth Green goes on to say in this interview, quote, "It's just so funny the way that information gets kind of put out there in the way that everybody agrees that it's the fact. George talks about when a fan insisted that they had been in a meeting where it was decided that the name of episode 1 was going to be The Balance of the Force. Don't you remember hearing that title? It's the same kind of thing. Star Wars is such a phenomenal global supernova that anything that gets said about it becomes kind of fact and gospel, and then taken by the legions of fans who are so excited to have more Star Wars that they roll off on all sorts of flights of fancy." I love that Seth Green did the thing there where he didn't deny that it was called Star Wars Detours, but worded it in a way to make it sound like he was saying it's not called Star Wars Detours.
Huh, yeah.
He was definitely knew how to play the part of somebody who can dance around a question.
Yeah. I mean, his job kind of depends on it, too. And it's like,
yeah. Oh, absolutely.
That's such a hard position to be in, especially with how secretive Lucasfilms are and how secretive Star Wars has to be for any new projects. Like, I don't even know how you would have any sort of press conference where you can't give any information.
Yeah. Like, it's almost a joke now about how, specifically with Star Wars, people don't give direct answers. I mean, they did a whole, what was it? Oh man, what's his name? Olaf and Frozen. I can't remember his name now.
Josh Gad.
Josh Gad. Thank you. When he was working on the Polar Express with Daisy Ridley, he did this whole series of vlogs of him trying to ambush Daisy Ridley with questions about Star Wars that she wouldn't answer.
Who do you think is the murderer on the Orient Express? The train that we're on right now.
I don't know.
And then this is you. You say.
I don't know, but you're not asking the right questions.
And then I say, what would you have me ask, Daisy, or whatever your character's name is? And then you say.
Who were Rey's parents?
Am
I a Jedi?
Right.
Is Finn paralyzed from the waist down?
Waist down. And then it says you answer honestly.
Even though we can't find a ton of details about this, based off of some details that would come out later, we can assume that the production of this was similar to Clone Wars. They were producing and making lots and lots of episodes before, working tirelessly, and then later on they'll figure out how people are actually going to see this. In another interview, when asked about when it would be released, Seth Green said, quote, "Listen, it could be next summer or 2025. George lives in a world where there is no concern about time. When you can self-finance anything you want, it gives you a very different kind of autonomy. You're not beholden to anyone on the planet. Shit, if I had that luxury, I'd take full advantage of it. George is living the dream, and I'm just trying to be as close to that dream as possible." Like with Clone Wars, after it had been in production for 2 or 3 years, they finally started showing some footage in an effort to get it picked up by a network. In August 2012, we had Star Wars Celebration 6, and details about the series were finally revealed. There was a panel that announced the show's official title, Star Wars Detours. They also had a trailer, a few clips from the show, behind-the-scenes reel, and a conversation between the creators, some of the cast, and George Lucas. One of the behind-the-scenes reels they showed was a thing of all of the voice talents in the recording studio. And this is where we learn who most of the voices are, because they show up for a split second in this reel. Some of the most notable names of recurring characters: Dan Milano was going to voice Dexter Jetster. Do you know who Dexter Jetster is?
I do not.
He is in Attack of the Clones. He is the big four-armed guy who owns the diner that Obi-Wan is friends with.
I've been serving Princess Leia these same cracknels since she was knee-high to a pig stinker.
He was going to have a much bigger role in this series, and his diner was going to kind of serve as a hub for a lot of the stories, almost like the bar in Cheers. Seth MacFarlane would be playing Palpatine again, reprising his role from Robot Chicken.
I totally saw the Emperor dancing the night away with 3 Twi'lek models.
There were 2 recurring stormtroopers that were going to be played by Breckin Meyer and Donald Faison.
We're the Royal Guards who's supposed to stop bad ideas like this.
Oh, Murray? No, he's out on paternity leave. Now, picture this. There might even be a guy who hands you a nice warm towel and guilts you into tipping him, huh?
There were some Clone Wars actors who were returning, like Catherine Tabor. She's playing Leia.
Leia, you look really...
Amazing. Yeah, I know. Why are you staring at me? Yeah, I'm famous and hot. Deal with it. I don't feel like the center of attention anymore. Fix that.
She previously played Padme in Clone Wars, and she also voiced Azula in Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Oh.
D. Bradley Baker was going to be playing Jabba the Hutt. And presumably every single weird alien that we would ever see in the show. And there are a ton of guest stars that they announced and showed up in this reel as well, including Hugh Davidson, Felicia Day, Nat Faxon, Gray Griffin, Jennifer Hale, Zachary Levi, Tom Shepard, Cree Summer, Joel McHale, Andy Richter, and Weird Al Yankovic.
Yeah.
The show also had Anthony Daniels, Billy D. Williams, and Ahmed Best reprising their roles from the films as 3PO, Lando, and Jar Jar Binks, respectively.
Amazing.
Obviously, at a convention, when you show this in front of a bunch of fans, they're all going to be super excited about it, losing their minds over it. Online reaction to the initial trailer and clips, though, was mixed as well. And you said you've seen stuff. Did you watch the trailer for this?
I believe I have. Like, I kind of jumped around from clip to clip and didn't understand, like, what was officially what.
Yeah. If you look online, there's a trailer that's about 2 minutes long, and then there are 6 clips that they release that are like little minute segments from different episodes. Some of the reaction to this, the animation was really strange. It was these giant heads on these tiny bodies. And the humor in the trailer especially was very, very hit or miss. And there was a lot of really dumb, broad jokes in that trailer. And there was a lot of stuff like Vader trying to act cool as a recruitment video saying the Empire's pretty hip, yo.
Yo, dudes, the Empire's pretty chill. Maybe you could, join it or something.
Kinds of jokes that would have been outdated even if they came out 10 years earlier. There were fan references like It's a Trap that were already kind of worn out.
This is a ploy! No. It's a ruse! No. It's an ambush! No. A subterfuge! No. A confining device! A snare? A box popped up with a stick! It's a trap! It's a wrap! Where's my hat? It's a trap! Sorry. Just finally figured it out on my way back to the office.
A Screen Crush article I found written at the time called the trailer, quote, terrible and unfunny, and said, it seems specifically geared towards people who want the reference to be the joke. Now, I think the trailer was mostly terrible with a couple of good gags, but the 6 clips that they released, I think showed a little bit more life to the series. I think there's some really good stuff in there. One of my favorite clips they released has Han and Chewbacca bickering like an old married couple.
Come on, get in the Falcon. Look, we both said or growled some things we didn't mean. You're not really leaving. Oh, really?
We have the ghost of Qui-Gon haunting Obi-Wan as a disappointed father figure.
Shouldn't you be haunting Darth Maul or Yoda? Go haunt Yoda!
Meyer and Phazon stormtroopers running through the Death Star on some madcap adventure.
What genius decided to install one bathroom per mile in this place?
You know, I bet the Emperor's bathroom has one of those heated toilet seats.
No way, dude.
Come on, you're doing the pee-pee dance. Come on, scented candles.
You got us electrocuted the last time we set foot in the Emperor's throne room.
You also, though, get bratty teen Leia and Palpatine talking about, quote, a resort, quote, raining chicks.
Welcome back, my master. How was the singles cruise?
Well, let's just say there wasn't a cloud in the sky, which was confusing since it was raining chicks.
So, yeah, definitely some cringe comedy in there. There's some good gags. One of my favorites is when the stormtroopers swing across the camera like Luke and Leia, and they fall into a chasm only to realize that it's actually just a matte painting. They haven't finished the chasm yet.
Oh, it's a matte painting. They haven't finished this chasm yet.
I guess they went over budget.
And a lot of the jokes that worked best were probably when they were taking a meta look at Star Wars. There's one of the clips you find online is Leia, who is saying that she only eats at Dex's, but then ended up doing a commercial for Rebo's. Apparently, Max Rebo also owns a diner in this universe.
Food tastes better on the hood of a speeder. Trust me, I'm a princess.
Don't settle for placebos. Come eat at Rebo's. Dex's Diner sucks. His diner may or may not meet the legal definition of sucking.
Is that your I want an autograph face?
I've fed you since you were a child. Knee-high to a, Ugnaught.
But at the very end, we have Han and Lando sitting together.
Wow, that kind of betrayal is just shocking.
Hey, business is business. They probably got to her just before Dex did.
Which, obvious reference to what he would do in Empire Strikes Back. I really liked that. But I do have to say, this trailer also features my least favorite trope in animation, which is the dance sequence.
I'm a fool for dancing, and you're a dancing fool. Hit it!
Good Lord, do I hate it when they have a dance sequence in 3D animation. I hate it. Please make it stop. A lot of people still were not sure what to make of this. It didn't have the same kind of enthusiasm that Clone Wars had when it was first announced. But people still were curious to see it happen. It was still like, maybe just the trailer is bad and the show could still be good. At the very least, the show could have a couple of good gags every episode, or maybe a couple of really solid episodes to kind of cling on to. It was strange, but people were curious.
I mean, we're curious about this as well, but
Oh, yeah. And I think anybody who watches it now is probably going to walk away with that same reaction of I don't know what this is, but I think I want to see more.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody was wondering all about this, but unfortunately, we would have to keep on wondering. Only 2 months after Star Wars Celebration 6, Disney announced that it would be buying Lucasfilm and going into production on a new series of movies. All of a sudden, Star Wars was taking an entirely new direction. George Lucas was no longer involved, and we had a different set of people with an entirely different set of priorities for Star Wars. And right away, people were wondering what this meant for Clone Wars, which had just finished its 5th season, or what would happen with Star Wars Detours. A few months after this announcement was made, in March 2013, Disney put out a statement saying that it would be taking animation in a new direction. They announced the cancellation of Clone Wars, and they said that they would be shelving Detours. In the statement, they said, quote, Detours was conceived and produced before we decided to move forward with the new Star Wars trilogy. And in the wake of that decision, Lucasfilm has reconsidered whether launching an animated comedy prior to the launch of Episode 7 makes sense. As a result, we've decided to postpone the release of Detours until a later date. I don't know about you, Dan, but honestly, this decision does make a lot of sense to me. They wanted to reestablish the characters, and that meant they wanted it to be taken seriously. They wanted to make sure that people took Star Wars seriously and they could rope back in the casual fans. Having something like Detours out there was not going to bring back the casual fans.
With Star Wars now being taken over by Disney, we're finding more of a balance, that we're seeing more humor.
Oh, absolutely. Disney now, is in a position where they are having a little bit more fun with Star Wars again. It's similar to the position George Lucas was in 2007 when he started to think about doing a Star Wars comedy series. The movies were finished, and now we're being able to play around with the universe a little bit more. And I think that is really like one of the things that happened. In a Reddit AMA a couple years later, when asked about Detours, Seth Green said, quote, I was introduced to Star Wars as a child, and it was without any irony or comedic lens. So I saw Darth Vader as scary, and I saw all of these messages very, very clearly. We didn't think it made any sense, in anticipation of these new movies coming out, to spend the next 3 years with an animated sitcom as 3 generations of kids' first introduction to the Star Wars universe. So it sounds like Seth Green was on board for that decision. I imagine there's probably business dealings there as well, where Clone Wars being canceled, you couldn't say the same story for, and I think that just had more to do with Disney wanted complete control over the property again and was just kind of end anything that was being worked on in the Lucas era. That's when they canceled LucasArts, the game development division, which I think was a massive mistake because LucasArts has developed a lot of wonderful things, not just Star Wars things.
What was the latest Star Wars game that everyone got mad at because it just turned into a pay-to-play?
Oh, Battlefront. And that was also when they declared all of the EU as legends and no longer canon, which that actually is a decision that makes perfect sense to me. If you're going to be making new Star Wars movies, you want them to be new stories, not rehashes of what some novelist thought of in the 90s. Detours was shelved. Now, over the course of production, we've now since learned through various interviews that they had produced 39 finished episodes with 62 more scripts written.
That makes sense now that when you explained Clone Wars, that makes absolute sense.
That's the same situation that Clone Wars was in. It's crazy that there are 39 finished episodes sitting on a shelf that we're not going to see. And I think that's probably one of the wildest parts of this story, is that so much work was done and now may never see the light of day. During the time, Green and Senreich continued working on Robot Chicken while working on Detours. That show recently completed its 10th season, and many of the animation team kept working with Lucasfilm, moving on with Disney to work on projects like Rebels. Also, interestingly, Donald Faison got to come back and voice a Star Wars character. He voiced a character in the animated Resistance show.
Hi, Faison. Is up? Is here.
Hey, everybody, look who it is. Oh, you know who it is.
Donald Faison's character in Resistance was named Hype Faison. I guess Faison is enough of a Star Wars name that they just named the character after him.
That's pretty great.
But what that tells me is that they wrote that character with Donald Faison in mind. So Donald Faison, I guess, is a massive Star Wars fan, which I didn't realize.
I'm looking at his IMDb right now, but he also did Star Wars: The Clone Wars as a tactical droid.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
And then in Robot Chicken, he did a lot of voices.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Donald Faison's been all over the place. That's somebody who doesn't get enough credit for being an awesome person.
Yeah.
Detours remain present in fans' minds. It's this weird thing. The fact that so much work was done on it makes the whole thing even weirder. And now it's starting to take on a sort of fabled cult status, almost to the same degree as the Star Wars Holiday Special, which is a truly cursed relic of Star Wars media. And I think a lot of the people who want to see it now want to see it because they know it will be bad. It's weird, and you want to know what it is.
Yeah. But it's kind of like with Jerry Lewis and The Day the Clown Cried. Like, everyone wants to see this movie just to shit on this movie.
Yeah.
Because they know it's bad. It's infamously bad. Mm-hmm. And yeah, for even if people claim that George Lucas is only going to do this for money, essentially you could sell these and people would buy them, but...
Oh, absolutely.
But you're basically just throwing the lamb to the slaughter at this point.
This year, 2020, has seen a real increase in people being interested in detours and asking about detours. Like I was saying earlier, it does make sense for the landscape we're in. First of all, we now have Disney Plus, which would be the perfect platform to release this on. But Star Wars is in a very similar position to where it was when the show was first being made. We don't have any new movies on the horizon. The last movie, the reactions were mixed on. Fandom is in a very strange place, and it makes sense that people want to see something that has fun with Star Wars again. I mean, we just had the release of the Lego Star Wars Holiday Special, which does that same kind of thing of poking fun with Star Wars.
Yeah, and that was really well done. Did you watch it?
I have not actually seen it yet.
Okay.
We were on Tony's Escape from Walt Disney recently for a Christmas special, and I was really hoping we would pull up the Lego Star Wars Holiday Special.
Honestly, from the clips that I saw of Star Wars Detours and watching the Lego Star Wars Christmas special or Holiday Special, yeah, it feels like it's now at that similar tone where they can poke fun at themselves.
Absolutely. At the start of the COVID lockdowns, the website Planet Scum started live streaming something. Somebody had this show. Do you know where I'm about to go with this?
No.
So there was this like comedy thing that was done at like South by Southwest or done it for like UCB. And Planet Scum started live streaming the George Lucas talk show, in which, quote, retired filmmaker George Lucas and Watto would talk to celebrity guests about Star Wars and whatever else. Mm-hmm. Have you heard about this, Dan?
I have not.
Oh, you should go look this up. Somebody dressed up as George Lucas and somebody dressed up as Watto talking about Star Wars. It is pretty entertaining. One of the things that they started to do in this is talk about detours and try to drum up a social media push to convince Disney Plus to release Detours. And this is definitely going into what I'm talking about, where people want to see it probably because they think it is bad. Part of the whole shtick of this show is that George Lucas is talking about how the prequels are great, and Watto is talking about how the prequels that he was in are great. What Disney is doing doesn't necessarily have the George Lucas stamp of approval. But Detours is like the last George Lucas thing that we have never seen. That is George Lucas's last time playing in Star Wars. I saw this on a Reddit thing. Apparently, somebody who worked on Detours actually sent the people at the George Lucas talk show a copy of half of the episodes. So they have seen a lot of this show. At this point, normally, we don't talk about when we record these, and we want these to be evergreen, but I kind of want to date this podcast a little bit because this part of the story is interesting. As we're recording this, it's December 6th. We were originally planning on recording this episode 2 weeks ago, and if we did that, this would be the end of the episode. But a week ago today, as we were recording this, on November 29th, an entire episode titled Dog Day Afternoon was leaked onto Reddit. And Dan, if I'm not mistaken, you didn't get a chance to watch this, right?
No, it had a copyright strike on it by the time that I got around to watching it.
Yeah, I jumped on this immediately. I had to see it, not only because it's Star Wars Detours, but this was an episode where Weird Al was one of the voices. I actually found out about this because Weird Al retweeted the post. And this was a full episode. The episode was only about 10 minutes long. I assume that they were doing it like Robot Chicken, where Robot Chicken episodes are 15 minutes or less. So it seemed like full episodes for Detours were going to be around that same length. And this episode featured Weird Al playing the bounty hunter Forlom and Andy Richter as the bounty hunter Zuckuss. Do you know about Zuckuss and Forlom?
I do not.
Okay, so these are two of the bounty hunters that show up in Empire Strikes Back when Vader is hiring all those bounty hunters to go find Han and Leia and Luke.
Okay.
They're in that lineup. So Zuckuss is this real short bug-faced guy, and Forlom is a droid that looks like C-3PO with bug eyes. The two bug eyes characters. The plot of the episode is they hold up Dex's diner for ransom and trying to get ransom money. At the same time, Dex is talking about how they're short on money, and so Dex hatches a scheme with the bounty hunters that they're going to blow up the diner, and Dex is going to cash in the insurance money. And at the same time, Zuckuss and Forlom will be able to look so much cooler for bombing this diner and will get a lot of street cred to get into the Bounty Hunters Guild. It definitely does a lot of that meta humor, talking about outside fan things. Forlom, which is for LOM, fans have been saying for a while. I don't remember if this came from fandom. I think this might be something that was printed on like a toy information card in the 80s, back when they were just making up details for characters, but said that for LOM stood for love of money. Again, that's one of those weird things that's never been officially canon, but in this episode, Weird Al says, I'm for LOM, which stands for love of money. There's also a gag about the two characters being mixed up, and the people in the diner constantly calling Forlom Zuckuss and vice versa, because one of the original toy lines actually switched the two character names. And so early on, those two characters were mixed up because some sources said this one was Forlom and this one was Zuckuss, and some sources said it was the other way around. These are these kind of deep cut fan reference jokes that I am here for.
Yeah.
I think personally, and it seems like a lot of the reaction I've seen online, the episode was pretty good. I mean, it wasn't the funniest thing ever, but the jokes that were in there worked. It wasn't super cringy. And it was a lot of fun, even if it was just fun to hear Weird Al say for love of money. Mm-hmm. Honestly, it really surprised me into being something that I actually now want to see more of.
Yeah.
The internet absolutely exploded.
Yes.
I think one of the big things is that this was originally posted in the subreddit Star Wars Leaks.
Yep.
Everybody on there was saying, holy cow, we actually have a real leak on Star Wars Leaks. Because most of the time, a lot of those leaks turn out to be fakes or untrue or something like that.
Yeah, I actually read through the post too, and the post that Weird Al had put out there wasn't, well, I guess it was from Leaks, but it was like, this subreddit's exploding right now. This is insane. And then someone commented below and be like, this is exploding because Weird Al had tweeted it. And someone actually linked Weird Al's tweet to the Reddit post, which is this weird, like, snake eating its tail type situation. But yeah.
There's a couple of things that we can learn about taking this one episode. We can make some assumptions about the production of the series. When they say 39 finished episodes, there's definitely a large part of me that is skeptical as to what finished means. When Clone Wars was canceled, they did a 6th season on Netflix, and that was like only a half season of whatever they had finished. And then they also released some animatics of some not quite finished episodes. And so there were videos online of that they had put up on StarWars.com of episodes of Clone Wars where the animations weren't finished. Sometimes it was in an animatic stage. Sometimes it was just like wasn't fully lit and textured. When I hear finished episodes, I wonder, do they really mean finished? Like, is it literally you could put it online and it is ready to go? Or does it still have some animation work to clean it up? If this episode is any indication, when they say 39 finished episodes, we mean finished. There is no part of this that is incomplete animation, rough animation, and there is nothing in this episode is in any of the previously released trailer or clips, except for one shot. I noticed there's like one quick shot of an explosion that they use in the trailer. And so that also tells me that they had a ton of finished episodes to pull from for the trailer and the clips that they released. I think it really is true when they say 39 finished episodes, they mean finished. The leaked episodes seem to be a lot more positive of a reaction than reactions to the original trailer. I think part of this is just because of the landscape we're in now, where it's been so long that there's so much curiosity for this show. But also, I think just the quality objectively is better than what was shown in the trailer, which tells me either the trailer was edited by people who were trying to just fit the broadest, dumbest jokes in there, therefore it was pretty corny and terrible, or whoever leaked this episode purposefully leaked one of the best episodes that they had created at the time.
I mean, if a lot of eyes are on this, like, it could be a way of, I guess, poking the mouse.
Yeah.
Or like, hey, if you're not going to release these episodes, this is one full episode that I have, and I can just keep on leaking more and more of these shows until you actually finally release it yourself.
Yeah, that could very easily happen. I think Detours has the potential to redeem Jar Jar. Jar Jar does make an appearance in this episode.
We added an exclusion for Acts of Gungan.
Misa need help. Misa have 2 dates on same night.
He's doing his same clumsy Jar Jar self, but for some reason, the way they play off of it in this show, it works so much better than it does in Phantom Menace around a bunch of other live action characters.
Yeah.
And I think that really speaks to like Ahmed Best being willing to come back to the role as well, because I think that this show gets Jar Jar more and could make Jar Jar be a more tolerable character.
He feels definitely more of this world, and he doesn't stand out as much as he did in like Phantom Menace, where like they're still messing with live action CGI, and he's kind of the butt of the joke because of not just like his character, but like how he looks.
Now, we still do not know who leaked this episode online, and it's pretty likely that we're never going to know who leaked it.
It was George himself.
Oh boy, do I wish. There's a couple of speculations on it. It could be somebody at, like you were saying, about somebody who worked on the show who just wanted to put it out there because they were proud of it and wanted to try to like push Disney Plus to do it more, especially seeing the reaction that it's starting to get on in fandom with people like the George Lucas talk show wanting to see this. It could be somebody at Disney who is similar to what happened with Deadpool. They are leaking this out intentionally as a way to kind of gauge reaction to see if it's something worth putting on Disney Plus. Although that one I feel like is less likely to be true because Disney did immediately pull the episode and didn't give much of a chance for there to be an online reaction to it.
Yeah.
I don't think it's Disney, but I would not be surprised if it was somebody who worked on the show and therefore had copies of the episodes or something. Maybe it was George Lucas. Maybe it was Seth Green. Who knows? We'll likely never know. Now, of everything that we have talked about on this podcast, I feel like Star Wars Detours is the one that we are most likely to someday actually be able to see. I think it's partly because, it is already finished and there's so much finished stuff. It seems more likely to be released. There's a part of me that wonders if we're actually going to see something between the recording of this episode and the release of this episode. I hope that doesn't happen for our sake.
Yeah.
It seems like kind of a 50-50 shot at this point that it will come out. I think it's more likely that we're going to see the Star Wars Holiday Special released than we'd see Detours released.
Yeah, I mean, that's more well known, but I kind of wish you saw the Christmas special. The decision not to go forth with Star Wars Detours, I think you were right in saying, like, the tone didn't feel right for what Disney was trying to establish. But now that the sequel trilogy is done, it's over.
Mm-hmm.
We don't really have any Skywalker-based movies from here, at least none in the foreseeable future, but we are seeing the world of Star Wars expanding, and we are starting to see that humor is becoming more and more common in Star Wars. We saw it in the movies, we're seeing it in the TV shows, and especially now that Lego Holiday Special.
What are you doing? Follow me.
But you're right there.
That's not me?
Sure looks like you. Helmet, chest buttons, heavy breathing.
It definitely amped it up, and I feel like now of any time is the right time to actually introduce it. And not only that, but you could take Star Wars Detours, release what is in the vault, and actually start creating more with the new characters that were introduced in the sequel trilogy.
Yeah, one of the things with Detours is comedy is something that can very quickly become outdated, and I have a feeling that there's a lot of pop culture references in Detours that is now outdated. Even stuff in the trailer was just horribly, horribly outdated. And also, it's probably still pretty terrible. I could see Disney going into production of their own Star Wars comedy series and maybe bringing the team back to, work on that and maybe releasing some episodes of Detours along with that. Based off of the reaction to things this year and based off of the reaction to this leaked episode specifically, I do feel like there's a good chance that we'll see some sort of comedy Star Wars thing in the future. It's tough to find because there's conflicting reports about this, but it seems like the show was never officially quote-unquote canceled. Seth Green and Matt Senreich could still be on the hook to make more of this and come back to it. I'm not 100% sure about that because, again, I found a lot of conflicting reports on that, and Disney likes to keep paying people to make something that never comes out. We're still someday going to get a Rian Johnson trilogy. That's kind of the end of the story for now of Star Wars Detours. Of everything we've covered, this is like the thing where there's like the freshest stuff happening in the story. And I am surprised that we had something happen in this story so close to the recording of this episode. I thought everything that happened with Detours was long and dead, but it's showing life again.
We got really lucky. That was pretty amazing because I know you texted the whole group about this and you're just like, oh shit, something's going down right now.
Is this something that you would be interested in seeing at all, Dan?
Definitely after watching the holiday special and seeing what they can do with that. I think they can do something great with this. As far as Disney Plus goes, I want to see the original, but I don't think that they're going to do it. But I think instead they're going to try and make their own.
Yeah, I think I would rather see something new as well. Disney is so much more protective over the brand than George Lucas was. And so there's a part of me that wonders if Disney will be able to have fun with it and play loose with the characters as much as George let Seth Green and Matt Senreich do for the original production. Again, I haven't seen the Lego Holiday Special, but if you're saying that that was really good, that gives me a lot more confidence that Disney can have fun with these characters.
Yeah, you were mentioning that this leak could possibly go out just to kind of like test the waters. I think the holiday special is kind of doing that now. They're testing the waters with being silly, and I think I would not be surprised if all of a sudden we woke up to see on Disney Plus that there's a whole first season of Lego Star Wars on there.
Lego Star Wars TV show, that is what you do. I really think that is the way to make this work. There kind of has already been a Lego Star Wars TV show. There were a whole series of specials. There were the Yoda Chronicles and the Freemaker Adventures that weren't full series, but Star Wars comedy using Lego characters. They were designed for a younger audience, but from what I've heard, those are pretty good as well and pretty special. And I believe you can find those on Disney Plus. I think I'm in the same boat as you there. Before we finish this episode, though, there is one more thing that I want to talk about, because I need to come clean on something that I did in this story. Earlier, I quoted a TV Guide interview with George Lucas from back in 2007, where he was talking about the production of Clone Wars. And, I borrowed a bunch of quotes from that. And there's one part in particular where he was talking about producing 100 episodes and then taking those out to studios. And I took those quotes a little bit out of context because I read them and implied that he was talking about Clone Wars there. Actually, what George Lucas was talking about was a live action series that they were developing at the time.
What?
And I'll just leave that as a teaser for more to come on this podcast.
Oh, man.
Stay tuned, because in the future, we're going to talk about George Lucas's canceled live action series.
Amazing.
Yeah, well, I guess that's going to wrap us up for this week.
Yes.
Yeah, so thank you everybody for listening. If you want to find more episodes of this podcast, go check out our website, pipedreampodcast.com, where you can also find links to our other shows like Come On Fahoogwapods, a Homestar Runner podcast, Escape from Vault Disney, and The Weird Alphabet. There's an Escape from Vault Disney episode with the four of us from Weird Alphabet on for his 27th episode, where we talk a little bit about Detours and Weird Al's involvement with Detours. So definitely go check that out. You can also send us your emails. What's that email address again?
It is notgetmade@gmail.com.
Notgetmade@gmail.com. You can find us on social media. We're at HDTNGM on Twitter and
How Did This Not Get Made on Instagram.
Perfect.
We make it as confusing as possible to find us on social media. At least it's not as confusing in my head as Fahoogwapods. Still don't know how to spell that.
FHQWPODS. Or
go to just as it sounds.
Just as it sounds, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
You can also find all those links at pipedreampodcast.com. And while you're there, you can check out our Patreon page. We have a Patreon supporting this show as well as Come On Fahoogwapods and the feeds for our previous shows like The Weird Alphabet, Thank You Internet, and Goodnight Hollywood. For $2 a month, you get a special bonus monthly show where some of us show up to talk about various pop culture things or whatever interests us that month.
We might as well call that just the Star Wars show.
Yeah. So check out Pipe Dream Unclogged. And for $5 a month, you get access to some more behind-the-scenes things, including all of the notes we do for this podcast. So if you want to read my 7.5-page essay about Star Wars Detours, go check that out on Patreon. That's going to go ahead and wrap us up. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Thank you.
And may the detours be with you.
And also with you.
I'm a fool for dancing, and you're a dancing fool. Hit it!
Hello and welcome to How Did This Not Get Made?
This is the podcast all about... I'm so sorry. My upstairs neighbor just started vacuuming right above me. Let me let it go for a minute to see if it picks up.
Okay.
Wait, I think they're stopping. Okay. It didn't even look like that picked up in the audio, so we should be fine. I'm so sorry about that. Go ahead. Do you want me to just go ahead and jump in with my part?
Yeah, go ahead and just jump in.
All right.